How's it going, Goodman Games Universe? Welcome to another episode of Raw Rules is Written. I am one of your hosts, Matt Robertson, also known as Great Bait.
And I'm Stefan Srot, also known as DM Bad Wrong Fun on a couple sites out there.
Stefan, who do we got tonight?
We got Judge Mark over here. Judge Mark, I'll just say from out he came to us from out of nowhere.
That was a good tie-in right there.
Well
Yeah,
done.
That was a nice tie-in.
I'll let you speak to that a little bit and introduce yourself how you would like, Mark.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Mark Manchester. I am one of the co-founders of Wayward Studios. We are a new third-party publishing company that is been embraced by Goodman Games and all their awesomeness. Our company consists of 4 guys who have known each other since high school. We've been gaming since high school. We are all old. So it's we've been together gaming and making up stories for the past 30 odd years.
Wait, why don't you give a shout out to who the other guys are, Mark?
Yeah, absolutely. So the other cohorts in Wayward Studios are Randy Miller. Randy tends to be our tech guy because none of us are very tech savvy. And then we have Andy Patch. Andy is he's other than a stellar therapist and company therapist in some respect. He's also our wordsmith. He's the guy that comes up with the fluffy and the sparkly words. Eric Anderson is our third partner. He's kind of our social media guru. He's got several younger daughters who tell him when we're making mistakes in the social media arena because none of us are very skilled in that. My son, who's 23, also tends to tell me when I'm being dumb or cringy or whatever. So, and then there's me. I am the mechanics guy, the rules lawyer, the guy who makes sure the numbers fit.
Now, Stefan, did you write those other 3 guys' names down? Because those are the 3 that snubbed us.
They did.
Yeah.
I was gonna let it pass. I didn't write it down.
No, I don't,
we'll
and I don't
catch
think
it on the replay.
I don't think you should let it pass. I think they should be raked under the across the coals for missing.
Mark, would you say you're the leader of the group?
I'm the older of the group by a year or two.
The best of the group?
Well, I don't want
to. We can just say it's like playground rules. I'm the oldest and I weigh the most, so I'm in charge.
I've always kind of been the dad figure for these guys, just I guess because I can beat them all up in a fight, or I don't know. But no, we all have a lot of different skills that work well together. Obviously, there's those few moments where we have a different of opinions, and that'll be cause for debate. But we usually kind of come on the same page when it comes to some of the products that we're working on.
Well, and you guys make up collectively Wayward Studios, and your first title was From Out of Nowhere. Is that correct?
That's correct. We had a very successful Kickstarter for From Out of Nowhere. It's a DCC compatible adventure for second level characters. We are deep in production of the second installment. This is going to be a 3-module series. The second one is called Knowledge is Power. You can probably sense a theme here. There's a bunch of gnolls and demon worshipping madmen and chaos lords and all kinds of stuff like that. And then we actually currently have a campaign starting on Friday, the 17th, on Backer Kit. We're going to dip our toes into Weird Frontiers. We have a series of 5 zines covering different classes. We have a zine for gunslingers with some new trick shots, companion tricks, magic hats, stuff like that. We have a Revelator zine that's going to have some more magic items and spells, miracles. and we have a luchador, because you got to have a luchador
Got it. I was
zine.
gonna ask. That was gonna
Yeah.
be
Oh
my next
yeah.
question.
They got new moves. We have a new mechanic for them for like the stare down with another luchador. We got some famous luchadors and heels in that one, as well as some new mask powers. I think that is in that one as well. We have the Mystic Monk zine that has some new chi powers, martial art maneuvers, as well as some magic items from the Far East. We have a series of one-shot little drop-in adventures called Tales from the Trails. That's another one. And then we have some bonus scenes. We have 3 new classes that we're introducing. We have the Heverino, which is a mountain folk, kind of like the
The hills
antithesis
have
of
eyes.
the antithesis of the hellbilly class. We have a sharpshooter, because I love Quigley Down Under, and you got to have a sharpshooter. And then a Chaveo, which is a spirit warrior class. So those are all zines that we got coming
Wow.
on this backer kit. So look forward to
Hey,
that. That one's exciting.
It's a whole mess of things, man. I
Yeah.
thought I was doing all right with my like couple adventures, but
Well, we do have a couple adventures kind of like in the back burner for Weird Frontiers too, because every time you watch a horror movie or something that has a kind of a Western theme, you're like, oh, I could probably work something like that in there. But
movies
yeah,
are great
that's
inspiration.
yeah.
Well, you guys heard it here first that all the stuff that Wayward Studios is working on. But let's jump into your questions, Mark.
Okay.
Elaine, if you could bring up the first question. If a caster knows the spell Mending, would they also know the reverse of that spell, Tear? And there's a little bit to this because in the description, Elaine, if you could bring up handout 1A, the caster can repair damaged objects, generally of a simple and mundane nature. The reverse spell Tear can cause minor defects, offers a fort save to that effective target. So it tells us right in the spell description about the spell Tear. So do they go hand in hand, Mark? Do you know if you know one, do you know the other?
I don't think necessarily. Rules is written from what I saw. There are a couple caveats. One is there's 2 different ways to cast a reverse spell. One is you learn the reverse of the spell, so they're 2 separate spells. You learn Mending and you learn Tear. But then the rules also say that you can attempt to cast the reverse, but you got to cast it at a lesser spell check die. So if you're normally a D20, you drop down to a D16 to try to reverse cast that if you don't have the Tear spell.
Yeah, Stefan, what are your
Gotcha.
initial thoughts?
Yeah, that's basically what I always think of it too. That if they know Mending, I'm gonna say, and they want to tear something up, I say go for it, man. But you're using a D16 instead of a D20.
I think we talked to Bob briefly about this, and he did say, Bob's advice was that each spell reversal would be its own spell slot as well. And so that's just like Mark mentioned. Elaine, if you could bring up handout 1B, on page 106 in the 8th printing of the DCC RPG, it talks about reversing spells. Some spells can be reversed to perform the opposite function of which they were intended. For example, Mending can be reversed to tear an object. Although spell reversal sounds simple and straightforward as a concept, think about it in practical terms. It's not that easy to uncook a chicken pot pie by following the instructions in reverse, is Joseph's words. But the next handout, handout 1C, this is what Mark was talking about. A wizard can learn a spell in one of its versions, normal or reversed. For example, they can learn Mending as a spell slot, or they can learn Tear as a spell slot. They can cast either of these spells as normal. Now, Mark, looking at the results, I'm asking myself, why don't I always pick Tear? Because Mending hardly ever gets used. Let's be honest, there's once or twice.
It's not a spell that I see a lot of action with. Yeah, I guess yeah. If I were given the option of picking Mending or Tear, like I roll my spells randomly and I get Mending, and my judge lets me pick the reverse, I would probably pick Tear.
Stefan, what are your thoughts? Because I think Shadow under Devil's Reef, I think I used Mending to try to fix the spoiler alert, to fix the statue that's in the cave, and I got a pretty high result, but it wasn't enough to repair the
Hmm.
statue or whatnot. But does Mending ever come up usually in your games?
Not so much. It's one of those things where you have to be like creative with it, but you also have to like find a good judge. Or, well, I don't know about good judge. Find a lenient judge. It's like, oh, there's a rickety bridge. Let me cast mending. It's like, well, you're mending one board on this rickety bridge, or you're mending
Right.
the ropes on the rickety bridge, but not the whole thing unless you get really high, I guess. So it's uh, you got to be creative, but yeah, it can be a tough one to have practically. It feels like it should be really useful, but it often doesn't come out like that in play.
Well, in the
But that said, hey, adventure writers out there, try to stick something in, or you can get something mended in there. It's a good little thing to reward people and kind of add a little uniqueness, perhaps, to an adventure.
and it's the size is relatively small in there. I mean, it's 1 cubic foot until you get to um, wow, it's 1 cubic foot for quite a while,
Yeah, yeah.
um, which is not a lot. But I agree.
So
I think a creative player with a judge who's interested in the rule of cool could certainly find a use for that.
you can definitely find uses for it. Now, I'm thinking, so Purple Sorcerer, we so often get, characters from there, and the spells are already populated. Terror is not one of those options. So that's not an option in Purple Sorcerer. So, I mean, all you players out there, if you get Mending as a spell from a pre-gen or something, give a shout out. Say, hey, can I switch that for
Hmm.
Terror? Because Terror is a more offensive spell. Um,
You
but
can tear
that
a
will
belt
take up.
buckle on your enemy's pants, make
Yeah.
him fall down
Yeah.
mid combat. It's tripping down.
Yep.
We'll talk about that in our next question. Lane, if you could bring up handout 1D, also on page 106, this is the second way that Mark mentioned. If the wizard attempts to cast the reverse of a spell in their repertoire, they make the spell check at a reduced die type. Stefan, this kind of lends credence to the fact that we don't need to know it as a spell slot, but we can try to unbake the chicken pot pie and reverse cast it.
Oh, yeah.
Uh,
I mean, yeah, page 106, it says it right there. You had it in a handout. If you attempt to cast the reverse of a spell in your repertoire, you make the spell check at a reduced die type based on standard dice chain.
so, Mark, what die would you drop someone down to if you wanted to? If somebody just said, "Hey, I want to try the reverse of this spell,"
Yeah,
what do you think?
I would base it off of whatever their spell check die is for
Hmm.
mending. So if they had like the mercurial effect where they get to roll at die 24 or whatever, then they would do the reverse at die 20. But I think typically most people are going to be rolling their spell checks at a die 20, so they would roll it at a die 16. And I think that fits. I mean, we talk about the unpredictability of magic and the wizards just trying to pull the magic, from the phlogiston and meld it in the way that they want it to work, and kind of riffing on their spell on the fly to reverse it. So yeah, you would
Yeah.
reduce the spell check
I-
die.
Is there a cause for it to be even lower, like a D14 or a D12, Stefan? Because it is so hard
I
to unmake the chicken pot pie.
I would say so, but like it only if you're trying to further alter it. It's like, okay, I want to do a tear, but I want it to only do this specific thing. I'll go, okay, you get tear at a D16, but you're like further on the fly alteration of that spell. We're going down to a D14 for that. A kind of similar thing. And I don't know about y'all. This could be perhaps a bonus question. I'll let people do it on the fly of like flaming hands. But you're fighting a demon who doesn't care about fire. You want to make that like icy fingers. Yeah, that's the reverse. Let's do it, man. But if you want to, or alter it further in some way so that you're going, hey, I'm probably just because statistically and the bonuses I have, I'm gonna maybe get that up to 3 targets thing. I want to be able to make it so that I can focus all those blasts on one target instead of having to dole it out 3 ways or lose 2 of them. I'm not sure if that's actually how I'd rule that, but anyway, it's an example I'm coming up with on the fly, so my example gets rolled at a lower step on the dice chain too. But anyway, I would say, okay, you're adding a further level of specificity. Let's go down once more.
Now, there is a little bit of a precedence for casting magic that you don't know. Well, I shouldn't say that you don't know, that you don't have trained as a spell slot. Elena, if you could bring up handout 1E on page 107, a novice wizard cannot cast magic beyond their comprehension, but they may attempt to cast a spell of any level that they have learned. So this just means kind of have knowledge of. That means I think. Well, you guys tell me your opinion. That means they may attempt to cast spells where they suffer a significant chance of failure based on the spell check modifier. But if they judge the attempt worthwhile, so be it. There are consequences for that failure. So it does say you can cast higher level spells. What
I
do you
feel
guys
like
think?
that is perhaps maybe it's not clear, but I feel like that's maybe actually talking about scrolls. You could attempt to cast a high level scroll, but if it's something that but you gotta save it around.
It's not
Not
necessarily in
sure.
the scrolls section, though.
That's
Mark, what do you
true.
think?
Yeah, it's kind of contradicts itself a little bit, where it says, they can try to cast a spell at that's of a higher level of a spell they know,
Yeah.
but that they won't
So,
know that spell.
do
So
you think that means known as taking up one of the spell slots? Like, so let's say us three are adventuring. We find a fourth level scroll. This might be to your point, Stefan. We find a fourth level scroll that's I don't know, whatever a fourth level scroll spell is. And, Mark, our wizard, says, "Hey, I'm going to learn this spell, even though I can't cast it technically." Is that what you think this circumstance is for?
Not sure. I'm looking, and actually, the handout said page 107. That's on page 106.
Is it on
So I'm
106?
That's 106. It's the first page in chapter 5, M for Magic.
There we
Um,
go.
but let me see. So I say that because I'm getting there in the book on my other screen and trying to read it, see what the further context is. Um, and it looks like it's talking about, it's in the spell checks section. So it's just talking about that. I think, yeah, it's probably not about scrolls because I think we've all seen some cases of wizards trying to cast, use a scroll for something they couldn't normally cast. That's a pretty common thing, and at least the whole style of fantasy role playing games. That doesn't necessarily make it a DCC thing, though. But I think it's the how it's written here. I think it's actually just supposed to be about learning spells a little bit, but it's a little unclear. It's just in the spell check section, so it's not under
Could
any kind of subheading.
could this be about? So I think Bob's recommendation was that you had to find an instance of terror to be able to know it. So based on, if let's say you get the spell mending, um, and you don't choose to swap that out, because it does say we could swap either one. You will either know one or the other. In which case, I don't know. See, it says you can try to attempt the reverse casting of it. But
I,
would you need to have knowledge of terror before you could try to cast that?
I mean, I would think everyone would have conceptual knowledge of tearing and mending, so I feel like that's enough. It is in my book.
and
Mark,
I would feel if you had the spell mending, you would have some theory on how to reverse that spell, because you have
Yeah,
the formula to make the mending spell happen. How can I
I
unmend?
I sewed these patches onto my jacket. I sure know how to tear them off.
Much
so
easier.
probably definitely
Yeah,
with research, maybe a few days or a week of studying. they could come up with a basic knowledge of maybe crafting that spell or comprehending how to reverse cast it.
I could even see allowing, a period of time where they're casting tear. They know mend. They're casting tear, so I'm making them roll at a die 16. And after they've done it a few times, maybe I start to rule that, well, okay, now this is kind of starting to become common knowledge for them because they've done it successfully, 4 times, 5 times, whatever.
Yeah.
So I might rule, do you want to add that as a spell? Do you want to, or depending on what my campaign looks like, maybe I'll just allow it to increase back up to the D20, depending on where the campaign's going. But
I might say next time you level up and you're learning new spells, you want to swap out Mending for
yeah,
Tear.
All right, well, let's give our rulings on this. I feel like we might get corrected by Bob on this one. But if a caster knows the spell Mending, would they also know the reverse spell Tear? Stefan, I'll let you go first. What's your final answer?
uh, yes, with the ad hoc dice chain penalty version, they would know that. They could separately, replace Mending with Tear or learn it in lieu of Mending. But that's my final answer.
I'm going to say yes as well, with the caveat that I think we're probably going to get corrected by Bob. So I'll throw that out there. But what convinces me is if the wizard attempts to cast the reverse of the spell in their repertoire, that makes me think that because they have that spell in their repertoire, they can try the reverse without having it as an additional spell. Because if they had it as an additional spell, then it'd just be a regular D20. It wouldn't be the reverse; it would be that spell. Mark, you get the final answer though. What's your final word?
so I'm gonna go, and Bob, this is for you. Specifically, I don't. It's not that they have knowledge of the spell and they have the theory of the spell, and that's where that translates to that lower spell check die. Do they actually know the spell? No. Do they have the knowledge because they know Mending that they can give it a whirl and try to deconstruct it by rolling a die 16 instead of a die 20? Yes. So I would say no, they don't specifically know that spell.
All right, Stefan, what's our second question for Mark?
Yeah. Question number 2: can the spell Tear break magic items if the result is high enough?
Now, the reason I asked this is like a follow-up question is because I'm going to start selecting terror all the time now. Because if you think about it, you can completely disarm almost anybody you're fighting that has a weapon. You can break the sword. Mark, what are your thoughts? Can we bust magic items with this spell?
Yeah, you can. You have to roll very high. I don't think you can start affecting magic until 30. So 30 plus is when you can start affecting magic items.
Mhm.
But what I would say, and this is what this says, you might, and this is the Mending version, that you might be able to fix like a chipped sword, magic sword. But in order to fix something more complex, you would need additional components. And I would say that is true for the Tear as well. If you wanna unsunder, some Vorpal sword or rune sword or something like that, you're not going to be able to just snap your fingers and cast a 1 round spell and shatter a rune sword. You're going to need some kind of additional components. It's probably going to turn into a ritual spell, and it would be my ruling.
That's a great point. That is a great point. Stefan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, short answer is yes. If you get high enough, you can break magical items. There's a little bit further precedent for it in the spell Shatter, but that's a level 2 spell, so we know it's going to be a bit stronger. But yeah, very similar to Mark. I think if you're gonna try to cast it, again, you want to make them quest for it a little bit. It's going to be more fun anyway. Make them get the same mermaid tears that helped forge that sword, or a gallon of mermaid tears is what the sword was like quenched in at the forge. That was the water when it was first made. Go get a bunch of mermaid tears again or something like that. um and you need to use that in the same kind of way. Otherwise, you might just depower it for a little. I don't know that I would actually do it kind of like a really low level dispel magic, but you could
Yeah,
do a little something so that it's perhaps temporary if you don't have the additional components, or maybe it just
well,
doesn't work. But a lot of this is getting into like you're reversing it, and there's very little rules as written. You gotta just feel out what feels right here.
it does say that all the objects get a fort save. So it can cause the spell
Hmm.
description says cause minor defects, but it gets a fort save. Now, on the opposite of that, the mending spell says generally of a simple and mundane nature. So, like you guys have both mentioned, with high enough results, let's take a look at some other instances where magic items can be shattered. Elaine, if you could bring up handout 2B, this is from page 231, the spell Transference. And this is a misfire when you're trying to take possession of another body. All reflective surfaces within a 15-foot radius shatter. Magic items are allowed a save to remain intact. DC 5, very simple save. But if you had a magic mirror, it could potentially shatter. It could break. So there
Hmm.
is a little bit of precedence out there for that. Elaine, if you could bring up handout 2C for us. Page 389, the crit table for giants is number 8. Weapon Smash. The giant's massive blow splinters the character's weapons. The PC's weapons have a 50% chance of being destroyed. Magic items are destroyed only 10% of the time instead of 50. So again, we have evidence that magic items can be destroyed if the circumstances are correct. Now, let's look at some of the results for Mend. Elaine, if you could bring up handout 2D on page 147-48. When we get to the 30-31 result level, just like you said, Mark, the caster permanently repairs very large objects of great complexity, even if they are magical in nature. That's what we get to. So, what would be the opposite of this? The caster permanently breaks any very large objects of great complexity, even if they're magical in nature? What do you think, Mark?
Well, again, and this says, like a chinked magic sword could be mended normally, but mending a broken wooden staff may require extra elements. So, like I said, if you have, some massive, artifact of great power, I'm not gonna tear it and destroy it with a mending spell in and of itself. Um, would I allow, as a judge, would I allow, again, quest for it? Well, I mean, this is the stuff of, this is the Mordor, walking the ring to Mount Doom and everything. I mean, that's the stuff of quests, of legend,
Yeah.
is questing to destroy some evil magic item. Pretty sure we've all run an adventure in our history where that was a thing.
What if
Using the
something
mending
innate?
spell for that, or the tear. Go ahead.
What if it's something innate like a magical doorway?
Hmm. Well, so are we talking about now, like, just, I mean, that's
Like
almost a dispel at this point. Um, but if we're talking about
like
actually breaking the door,
breaking a magically sealed door,
um,
tearing it.
you,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, now the one thing that it doesn't really talk about is the size of the magic items. It talks about large mundane items, but a large door that's magical, does that mean the whole door counts as a magic item, or is it just still a large door with a magic enchantment on it?
Well,
Um,
in the description, it says very large objects of great complexity, even if they're magical in nature. So there's our description right there. So it says that it can be large objects of great complexity. The examples are the chinked magic sword.
mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
Stefan, what are your thoughts?
Um, I I think I would allow it if it's like you've already damaged the Dark Lord's. If we're talking like the One Ring. If the One Ring already has a crack in it, then I might let you do it. But you have to do something that to weaken it before it's good. But this is something that's going to greatly depend on, I guess, the power level of the magic item. And it's just, to me, the answer is it's just going to be what feels right for the situation. It can't be a one answer on this because we got just too much variety in there.
I have to agree with you there. That's a great point. The power of the magic item. Let's bring up the most minor casting for Mending, page 147, 12 through 13. The caster repairs a minor defect in a simple object of non-magical, non-living nature. The repair lasts for 24 hours, could be no more than 1 cubic feet, like Mark mentioned. So, mending a torn shirt, connecting two halves of a broken sword, restringing a bow. These are pretty simple things. But with just that basic result for the spell tear, you could snap a sword in half, I would say, by that description. So the tear becomes a pretty offensive spell. Mark, would that extend to breaking the claws of a creature?
Well, it says non-living material, and I guess
Hmm.
Yeah,
is our claws, you know what I mean? Are they
they're-
alive? I would say I would rule that they are part of a living creature, and I
yeah,
wouldn't allow that. But
that's a good point.
you're fighting a guy with a sword, and you're within 5 feet of them, because I think that's the starting range of that. Wizard cast. I mean, now it is a 1 round cast, so it's going to happen in the next round. But I think rules as written, you could probably pull that off,
I
That's a
think so
good point.
too.
and that's going to make for a
I,
lot of angry warriors.
I mean, it would be a lot more useful than the spell mending, I think.
Oh yeah.
So mending gets used very situationally, very not quite as and so you could take the spell tear and always reverse cast mending if you really needed mending. So that's my advice to all those players out there. Start asking if you can have tear instead. But let's give our final answers. Can the spell tear break magic items if the spell result is high enough? Rules is written, I am going to say if you hit that threshold of 30 to 31, then yes, tear can break magic items. But I do love the point that Mark made that it may require some kind of energies that were present when it was created. And it does say may. That'll be up to the judge's discretion. Stefan, what's your final answer?
Uh, yeah, but basically the exact same answer there. I don't think I've got anything further to add on it.
All right, Mark, you get the last word.
I agree. We had it right on, and Bob agrees too.
Is Bob in the chat?
No,
No.
when he sees this, he's gonna be like, "Who is this guy calling me out?" Bob,
He'll
you
love it.
teamed up on Matt at your last session, so I got his back.
Thank you,
I
Mark.
got you.
Mark, we might need to have you on more often.
Wisconsin.
We might need to have you next with Bob.
Put me on, Bob. Let's go, Bob.
Then we can both get yelled at.
Right.
Let's, Elaine, if you could bring up our third question for the night. What benefit is there to casting Patron Bond on others? Now, the reason I ask this is because as I'm going through these spells, thinking of some questions for Raw, I've never ever had anyone in 3-4 years of gaming in DCC cast Patron Bond on someone else. Stefan, have you?
No, I haven't. But when I looked at this and was reading the win cast on other, I was going, oh, there's some interesting things here.
Oh,
Yeah, we've been
so
sleeping on this.
Mark, what do you think? What benefit is there to casting Patron Bond on others? Why should we do it, or should we do it?
Well, and yeah, I cannot recall any instance where any of my players or myself cast Patron Bond on another. But I think there's a couple benefits. One, you get benefits if you recruit an agent for the patron. That game wise, that translates to a bonus on your next invoke patron roll, which so mechanically it helps you. Role playing, I think it's a great, I mean, if you look at the patron as an actual entity that has an agenda, and you're recruiting for that patron, I think there's a lot of role playing potential. But just mechanically, rules as written, you get benefits, you get bonuses to your invoke patron rolls, the more people you recruit, and the better you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to go over some of the results, but let's look at the definition of the spell. Elaine, if you could bring up handout 3A, and this is only the first line. There's many more to the definition after this, but this is the gist of it. On page 148, the caster commits themselves to the service of a supernatural lord, forming a pact to gain its support as their patron, so long as they continue to please it with their services. If we bring up handout 3B, please. This is the most minor result, the most smallest success. On a 12 or 13, you're casting this on someone else, which is the subject. They get a luck check once per month at a -4 to ask for a favor. So once a month, they can say, "Hey, Beelzebub, can I get a favor?" And you can. It can't be magical. Can you uh, break the buckle on this guy's armor so his armor falls off? And then, of course, you'd have to make that luck check with a -4 penalty. So
Yeah, and I'm guessing
that-
it doesn't set a DC, but I'm guessing this is, as written, intended to be a roll high luck check where there's a DC to it.
you think so?
Which, well, at a
Or is it a
-4,
typo? Or is it a
cause,
typo that said it should say
yeah,
+4?
Do we look at
that
it
I
as,
can't say. You
do
can
we
look
look
at
at
it
it
one
as,
way or the other.
yeah, is it hard for that agent to do that?
Honestly, if I was I would just make it easier and tell the player, like, hey, write on your sheet once a month. You can make a luck check with a D24 and ask for a small favor. That's
There you
honestly
go.
what I would do, because that sounds more simple to me.
Using the dice chain. That's an
There it
excellent
is.
idea. But yeah, so each time the luck check is attempted, there's a 1% cumulative chance that the patron asks for something in return. So make your players keep track of that. The caster is viewed favorably for bringing more followers. Just like Mark said, they get a +1 to future Patron Bond and evoke patron checks for every 10 followers.
Yeah.
Now, let's get into the big stuff. And this is the reason. So I'm looking through this spell, and I was like, this is... Elaine, if you could bring up handout 3C, page 149, the result of 24 to 27 is very achievable. It's super achievable with a little bit of spell burn, and especially if you're second or third level casting this and you got like a +4 or 5, drop a little luck on there, maybe a little halfling, this. But 24 to 27, you start getting followers. So the subject gets 1d4 +1 warriors, each of 1d3, level 1d3. I mean, that's crazy. What do you guys think of that?
I'm usually the one running it, but I would almost be afraid to recommend this to a player in an ongoing campaign, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to keep up with that now.
Yeah.
But if I become a player in an ongoing campaign and I'm lucky enough to be a wizard or an elf, I'm gonna be doing that, or I'm gonna be like, hey, good wizard elf buddy, I got some recommendations for you.
Now, Mark,
We need some meat shields here.
You're the judge in your game usually, right?
We rotate, but yeah, I judge a lot.
So once your players see this and they want to cast Patron Bond on each other,
guys, if you're watching this later on, tread with caution.
So what do you think about that? 24 to 27, very achievable. The subject, not the caster, but the subject, gets warriors.
I think thematically, it's awesome. as a judge and the record keeping that involves, a little bit much. But thematically, I think it's very cool. I mean, the idea of followers being drawn to this patron servant, I think that's a great story. They're probably, they're going to be meat shields because I'm gonna find ways to thin the herd.
So I
And
think
I will
one
say
of the
that
go ahead.
that +1, for every 10 followers recruited and bonded, you get a +1 bonus to Patron Bond and Invoke Patron, max +5. All the patron spells are things cast in lieu of Invoke Patron. So that that permanent bonus, if you're getting to that point, that is for any patron spell that you have received as well. So I don't know. As a judge, my mind is going towards like, I'm gonna give this to some bad guys. They're gonna have +4 to their regular spell check and +9 to their patron spell checks because they've got a bunch of followers. The PCs, if they're at the end of the dungeon, the PCs have been mowing through those followers by the time they get to the end. But that's where my mind is going.
Yeah, absolutely. The I lost my train of thought here, but what was I thinking of? Well,
That's what I
let's
kept
just
for interrupting you.
no. I had something. I'll come back to it. So I mean, if we go over the 24 to 27, you +2 bonus to the next casting of Invoke Patron, and that would be on top of whatever bonus you've gotten for 10 followers. So that could be up to a +7. But yeah, that's a massively powerful. I know what I was going to say. So I think the reason that it doesn't get cast as often is because it takes like a week to cast. I think this is
That's
the one
true.
takes a week to cast plus quest.
This
So
this is a great spell for your campaigns and your long. I mean, if you're running a con game or a one shot, it's just not going to happen. You're just not going to you're not going to have anyone interested in doing that because of the cast time and whatnot. But for a longer term campaign, great use. It would be very thematically very cool.
and so I think there's a small aversion there for other people wanting to take on like a caster's patron. Like I know when I play, I was like, no, I don't want to bond to your patron. I want to keep my options open. Like I might run into Cesricon, dude. You know, I mean, isn't there a little bit of mentality when you play? You're like, no,
Sure.
I don't want to do what you're.
Yeah, low level wizards, they're always like looking at that section of the book or one of the the annual or something and going, who do I want to seek out with? Like, who do I really crush on?
Yeah. And then you look at the patron taints and you're like, oh.
I don't know about
I
that
mean,
OBTQ.
if you're out there though, and you've got Invoke Patron Bond, if you're an elf, definitely, you need to start getting followers, and those followers need to start wanting to be a follower so they can get free warriors. I mean, if you're playing a campaign out there, you guys need to consider it. But let's give our final answer, Stefan. What benefit is there to casting Patron Bond on others?
I mean, temporary and permanent bonuses to your Patron Bond and Invoke Patron spells for yourself. The other person is going to get to do luck checks to ask for favors. They might get followers. You get on the high end, and it'll be like, oh, there's a 1, 2, or 3% chance the patron might ask for something in return. But hey, that's just fine if I'm getting 1d4 warriors each of level 1d3. Like, sure, I'll go on another adventure with them. Absolutely.
Yeah, I have to agree completely with what you said. I'm struggling a little bit with these spells that have like a weak casting time because I feel like it kind of limits their usage, and so I'm trying to figure out a way that you can not hand wave, but have a couple rolls or something.
And I think this is exactly why that limits it. I mean, because otherwise you're going into adventures with an army. that is a balance right there. Is keeping the numbers low because it takes so long to do it. Um,
So,
Yeah.
what's your final answer, Mark?
I agree with you guys 100%. For the caster, they get the benefit of invoke patron bond bonuses, some starting temporary, ending possibly permanently, depending on how well you roll. For the subject, it's huge. I mean, it starts with luck checks and ends with your own personal armada of followers. And then from the judges' advantage, it's just a great way to tell a story. Yeah, from a campaign perspective, that just opens the floodgates to all kinds of stories, I think.
Now, I think the one caveat is that the subject, whoever is the patronee, has to act in the manner of the patron from then on, right?
Yeah.
There's no morale
Yeah.
check. These warriors are following every word they say. But as soon as they do something questionable, boy, those warriors might just turn on that subject and stab him to death, him or her.
Absolutely. Yeah, the role playing
Uh,
potential is great. I mean, this is just the whole Patron Bond stuff just shouts of Elric and Michael Moorcock and if how he had all these bonds with the demon lords and the elementals and um just great. Yeah,
right.
they're still honoring these ancient pacts, but we're only going to let you mess with us so long before we're going to start pushing back.
I'm looking forward to hearing how your players start casting Patron Bond on each other.
Yeah.
Stefan, did you do the first and third question, or did I do the first and third question?
No, I got the fourth. We're taking turns.
Okay, take
So
it.
yeah, question number 4, Elena, is does a successful casting of read magic allow a scroll written or a spell written on a scroll to be cast immediately?
This is a tough one, Mark. I think there's conflicting information in the book about this one. So, what do you think right off the bat?
Uh, uh, First gut reaction based on what I saw is no. There is one part that says that read magic allows the comprehension of the spell, but does not activate the spell. So I would
Steph,
say you gain the comprehension of the spell, but you still have to cast it.
I couldn't agree more. Stefan, what do you think?
Yeah, it's one of those things where I'm going, dang, I've just been. Is read magic required for for casting from scrolls? It kind of seems like it. I never realized that.
That's the
Um,
question, isn't it? That is the
yeah.
question.
So I'm going, oh, this is why people been dogging on read magic for so long, but this is why it matters. If
Well,
what I'm thinking is accurate, at least.
let's go through some of these handouts and see if we can get to the bottom of this. So, Elena, if you could bring up handout 4A for us, page 152 of the 8th printing of the DCC RPG. The caster can read magical texts such as magical scrolls, books, and tombs, as well as magical inscriptions on swords, arches, and the like. This allows comprehension, just like Mark said, but does not activate the spell. So they can read the magic on the scroll, but it doesn't activate it. The caster can learn the reverse of the spell, obfuscate magic, which renders magic text illegible. Now, Mark, you got your book open. What's the casting time on this spell?
1 round.
1 round. So it takes a whole round. Let's go into the minor results. Elena, handout 4B, please. Results 12 through 13. They can read magic text for 1 round, long enough to read a single sentence or phrase. They retain the phrase even after the duration ends. Reading a complete spell scroll typically takes 1 turn
Wow.
per spell level. So this is not enough time to read a complete spell. Stefan, this is the sentence
Yeah,
right here that completely trips everything up.
I would suspect that a great number of people are not going by this, including official Goodman Games adventure writers,
I,
because
I
I
think
found a few too many spell scrolls in adventures that would like in funnels, even that where it's
Yes.
like this isn't, maybe that's just for saving for later, but I suspect this one is forgotten or ignored. I'm not sure which by like 99% of folks, if like I said, if it's what I'm currently thinking.
Well, there's contradictory information out there. So, Elaine, if you could bring up handout 4D on page 36, the thief ability cast spell from scroll. Now, this is a class ability,
Mhm.
but provided a spell is written on a scroll, a thief can attempt to read the scroll and cast the magical spell. The spell check DC is as standard, but the thief rolls to indicate the die type to attempt to beat that DC. So this happens on that round. When they attempt to do it, they would be casting it, and it wouldn't take a whole turn. Is that how you interpret that, Mark?
Yeah, the sentence here that says reading a complete spell scroll typically takes 1 turn per level. That I guess I got a question. Is read magic required to cast from a scroll? I mean, it says that you can read magical texts such as magical scrolls, but is that the same as casting from magical scrolls? I don't
Well,
I don't know that I know the answer to that.
yeah. I would say,
Well,
this could be good if you got, we found these Serpent Men scrolls. They're written in Serpent Manese. We gotta, so I can't just pick this up and read it. And I think most, the kind of implication is most wizards, they're writing their spells in some kind of code or the way that makes sense to them.
Yeah.
and
The
that's
three of
how
us
I've
here, we've
usually
all
played
written
it too.
adventure modules. When you first write anything that you're going to run at the table, it probably doesn't make a lick of sense to anyone else because like you're just basically doing shorthand.
Right.
Yeah,
You have
that's
to,
how I've always played it. It's
so.
usually in a different language, but magical writing the same. But the thief ability is cast spell from a scroll. That's like their legit ability, and
Yeah.
they don't need to. They're attempting to read the magical language by that ability.
Mhm.
And so with the use of that, they would get a roll, the standard die type, to try to cast the spell. It says right there they can read the
But
scroll and cast it.
with thieves, they don't get to add their intelligence or personality. So is this just some kind of, I read it, the scene from Army of Darkness where we're faking the last word there. We're just going good enough.
Yeah.
Let's see if I make this happen.
Yeah.
And let's see if I'm lucky.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly wouldn't rule, my thief finds a scroll and it's a 2nd level scroll. I'm not gonna make him take 2 turns to cast the spell and then roll his die 14 or whatever it is to see how well he does. That just I guess conversely, I wouldn't have my wizard do that either. If he found a scroll. Yeah, that's
It's a little conundrum, and so I didn't bring the slide up for it. I could have swore I made a slide for this. Elena, invisible slide number 4Z. Let me look. Stefan, what page is it where it says to draw something from your pack or
Oh,
to cast to
uh,
uncork a potion? Let me see if I can find it
it's
real quick.
somewhere in the combat set. Let me see. Oh, I found it.
Okay,
Page
page
78.
78. So unfurl the scroll is one action. And the ones that can be part of a movement are noted. So just opening the scroll or uncoking a potion is considered one action, the same as an attack. Now, reading a scroll and drinking a potion, it says one action
an
here,
action.
not one turn.
Yeah.
So where do we go with this?
I think I think there's I think there's contradictions in both of those. So kind of hard to make a rule as written because
Yeah,
I don't.
I think we got to go rules as intended on
Yes,
this.
and I think the rules as intended are that if you cast read magic, you then the next round can cast the scroll or read the scroll.
I'm thinking the actual intention might be is this is what you need to do when you find a scroll written in another language or just a magical language to to
decipher
fully decipher it so that you can copy it into your own spell book.
Yeah.
interpret
And
it.
thinking,
Let's
go
go to
ahead.
the further slides because there is precedence for that. Elena, if you could bring up handout 4E on page 373, we get into scrolls. Using a scroll, it says a scroll need only to be read to be activated. The reader then makes the appropriate spell check to determine the results. So all we got to do is read it. Now, if the read magic takes 10 minutes and everything else says it takes one action, those are kind of contradictory. But if handout 4F tells us about knowing a spell versus reading a spell. Elena, if you could bring a handout 4F on page 373. As described, a wizard must typically make a check to learn a new spell. This check determines whether the wizard can correctly memorize the poses. Oh, that might be a misprint there, or maybe I missed something. Materials, invocation, rituals. I might have cut a sentence off there. Required to draw from the spell. Because the scroll contains precise instructions on the casting, the wizard does not need to know a spell in this way to cast it from a scroll. If a wizard casts a spell from a scroll without knowing it, he cannot memorize the spell thereafter. So this gives
And
us a
I
little
looked at
bit.
it. It is poses, and the
It is poses, yeah.
gesticulations you got to do.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Poses like
Memorize the
hands.
poses, materials, invocations, and rituals. Yeah.
So does that change our interpretation of
So
read magic at all?
yeah, I think what I would say is that if you cast read magic on a scroll and take however long one turn per spell level, then you have gained knowledge of the scroll. You're able to add that to your spell book or possibly learn it if you have a spell slot available. But if you just read the spell, cast the spell right off of the scroll, it no longer becomes a usable scroll as far as after it's been cast. It's kind of done, and you can't
That's
then you can't add it to your spell book or anything like that.
that still doesn't resolve our 10-minute time limit on read magic though.
Well, the
I,
read
I
magic is only one round.
Well, yeah,
The
but to
it
read
la-
a scroll takes 10
that it
minutes.
takes like 10 minutes to fully read a scroll that is a first level spell,
right,
and
and,
and 20 minutes for a second level, etc.
and
So
that I think that would be. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
let's go to handout 4G real quick. Non-spellcasters reading scrolls. So we've got rules here for that. Thieves have been known to read scrolls in desperate circumstances. Any character class can attempt to cast the spell on a scroll by making a spell check appropriate to their class, like a D10. Now, this doesn't say you need to know what it is or even be able to read magic. If we have the spell read magic and it says takes 10 minutes to decipher the scroll, does that mean that the wizard has to teach the words to everyone just so they can cast it at a D10 if needed? That seems like a lot of extra work there.
Yeah.
For me, it kind of sounds like what Stefan was saying, that that's the Clat du Barat and necktie moment where the warrior is just reading the words, trying to phonetically sound it out, and he's got a die 10 chance, a die 10 roll
Yeah.
to see if he can actually make magic happen.
It'd be like me trying to read, an actual book in Spanish.
Right.
I can
Oh,
sound it out, and I know a few words, but I'm
And
not going to get
butcher
I'm going to
most
get a
of it.
lot of pronunciations wrong.
Yeah.
all right. But we're talking about read magic here. So in reference to all
Yeah.
these things, we're talking about the spell read magic. I've got one more handout, handout 4H. This is not the opposite, but kind of like the partner, write magic. On page 236, the caster transcribes magical writings onto a scroll, which can be read at a later time to create a spell-like effect. So this tells us that scrolls are written with magical writing that technically we should need read magic to read. But does that
I,
mean by the rules, raw rules is written, that it takes 10 minutes
I,
to decipher what's on a scroll?
I think it takes 10 minutes to properly study it, because there's I could read Beowulf and I could study Beowulf. And studying is going to take a lot more reading, even though it's the same amount of words. It's going to take much slower reading and going, what does that sentence mean? What's that? What's the subtext here? So I kind of think that's the difference. That perhaps, yeah, read magic. It's just for being able to copy bound scrolls into your spellbook so that you know them permanently. I think that's what it's for.
I don't know. I might have to disagree because if we look at the next result, 14 to 17, it's only the 12 or 13 that it's that one round that you can't read a scroll.
Mm,
But 14 or 17 says, hey, you can read magic long enough to read one level one spell. So it's almost like that casting chill touch in preparation for your upcoming attack. Like, hey, I know that I'm not going to get the effect this round, so I want to preemptively cast it chill touch before I get into a fight, so I can use it right away. That's what I always try to do. Is this read magic like a preemptively spell? Hey, I should read this so I can cast it when this fight comes up.
uh,
Mark, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, when you move down to like the 14 to 17 range, where it's you have the ability to read magic for one turn, which is long enough to cast or to read and understand a first level spell. Yeah, I'm going to side with Stefan. This is learning the spell with enough depth that you could copy the spell into your spell book, learn it as a spell, eventually as a spell slot. The other one is just you know burn and turn, just fire it off, and then the scroll is the magic of the scroll is returned to the phlogiston, and that's the end of the scroll, and
yeah.
and you didn't do anything to learn the spell. You just regurgitated the words. You cast the spell, but you have no idea the mechanics behind it after that.
All
Yeah.
right. Well,
I'll
we
say
are
is
near.
that. Yeah, I was gonna
Go
say
ahead.
an hour is like flown by. These were some
Yeah.
fun questions today.
Let's get our final answers on this one. Does this, and I'm going to give you two little questions here. Does a successful casting at 12 to 13 of Read Magic allow a spell written on a scroll to be cast immediately? And does a successful casting of Read Magic at 14 and above allow a spell written on a scroll to be cast immediately? Uh, I think it's my turn to go first, Stefan. I'm going to say that a successful casting of Read Magic. Um, this is a tough one. Uh, I don't think it does allow for a spell to be cast immediately on a 12 to 13. Just by the wording in the spell results, I'm not. I think I'm gonna have to give my first I don't know answer and wait till Bob comes on the show. I think it's meant to be. Hey, you need to study this spell, read the magic, and then you can cast it. That 10 minutes to cast the spell really messed with my mind here, Stefan. I've got conflicting
Mhm.
raw information. What's your final answer?
My final answer is no, it doesn't allow it because you are already allowed to do it. I think the real answer is you can do it immediately. I can open up a textbook and read the words. That doesn't mean I really understand them or I'm keeping any of that knowledge after I close the book. And I think it's the same kind of situation here. So
All
that's it. What
right,
about you,
Mark.
Mark?
And I'm going with read magic is different than casting a spell with a scroll. Read magic allows you to gain knowledge of of what's on the scroll, potentially learn the spell. You can't cast it. You can't cast read magic and then cast the spell immediately. Those are two separate things. Read magic allows you more understanding of what's on the scroll. Casting a spell off of a scroll is just like that. It's just regurgitating words on a page and then forgetting about it.
All right. Well, Mark, it has been a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you for coming on. Give us a quick update. Let's drop that link in chat one more time. What's your next project coming out?
Next project, we are on Backer Kit. We are it launches on Friday the 17th. It is a series of zines called the Wayward Gazette. We have it's for Weird Frontiers. We got 5 different zines plus 3 class zines that are all available with different funding levels. So
Mm.
that's what we're
All
working on.
right.
And if you
All
need a
right.
little Weird Frontiers before then, I got my own thing, Big Trouble for a Little Blood, and yeah, check that link out in the chat too.
And what would Jack
All right.
Burton do? Is there a
That's
Jack
that's the
Burton?
question.
Is there a
There's
Jack
a guy
Uh,
Burton?
named Mac Durden. He's very
Nice.
legally
that's
distinct.
pretty close. So our next show is going to be on the 28th of May. It's almost verified that Levi Combs is going to be on. He's got to check one more thing, but we're hoping to get Levi on the show. And Elena, thank you for being an awesome hostess as always. We'll see you guys in a couple weeks.